watchdog report finds that some branches of the military were slow to process COVID vaccine exemptions. What spurred this investigation? Produced by Defense News and Military Times, this is the Early Bird Brief. Each morning we bring you the defense and national security news of the day. Also, the VA announces its goal for housing veterans this year. What does this all mean for our defense and security? You'll find out. I'm your host, Simone Perez. Today is Friday, March 15th, 2024. A quick heads up to listeners, be sure to tune in on Monday for an episode on the nearly $1 trillion defense budget request that is facing headwinds both at home and abroad. Now back to the show. First up, a watchdog investigation found that the military was slow to process COVID-19 vaccine exemptions. For more on this, Pentagon Bureau Chief Megan Myers joins us from the building. So Megan, what spurred this investigation by the Pentagon Inspector General to look into how the services processed COVID-19 vaccine waivers?
So in August 2021, the Pentagon announced that they were going to create a mandate to get the COVID-19 vaccine. And a few months later, a bunch of complaints had piled up to the Pentagon's IG hotline saying that, hundreds of service members were trying to get religious exemptions to the mandate, and they were all being rejected. And the feeling was that these services were just sort of kind of blanketly rejecting them, just rubber stamp, no, not actually giving them the individual attention that they require. And they felt this way because most of those religious vaccine requests were denied. And so the IG decided to look into it, and it took a couple of years for them to finish, but that's not necessarily what they found in the report.
And what did the IG find?
So what the report found was, rather than this kind of hypothesis that the services were speeding through the waiver process and rejecting all of them, they actually found that the Army and the Air Force were blowing the deadlines required in policy. The Army allows for 90 days to review one of these requests. The Air Force allows 30 days. And in the sample of cases that the IG selected, the services were taking twice as long, basically, to be able to adjudicate these requests. And what they found in how the process was handled is that actually it looked like the services were doing a thorough individual review of every request, but still coming out on the other side saying, we understand that this is your sincerely held religious belief, but we have to weigh this against readiness, health and safety concerns, and we're finding that, the health and safety concerns outweigh your sincerely held religious belief.
Another important story, in response to the increasing number of homeless veterans, the VA announced its new goal to house 41,000 of them. Capitol Hill Bureau Chief Leo Shane III joins the episode today to break down the VA's new goal. So Leo, 41,000, that's the number of homeless veterans the VA is hoping to lodge or house this year. Tell us, why that number?
Yeah, Veterans Affairs for the last few years has set pretty specific goals for how many veterans they want to get into permanent housing, and this is part of their ongoing efforts to bring the number of homeless veterans down to solve that problem, zero that out. So this year they're announcing 41,000 veterans. That's an increase from 38,000 veterans last year, and these are veterans that they want to not only contact but put into permanent housing. There's also a pledge in here that 95% of those will remain in permanent housing. So it's a goal not to just, reach out and make contact, but to actually make sure that these folks are ending up in a stable situation and they stay in that situation. And that involves not just, providing housing or housing vouchers, but providing wraparound services, making sure that they're connected to mental health care, making sure they're connected to disability benefits or other things they may be eligible for. So now last year, VA set a goal of 38,000, and they actually helped about 46,000 veterans, help them into permanent housing. I asked if they felt like they were undershooting their goal of only going for 41,000 this year, and they said they really view that as a floor. They're going to be looking at a lot of resources, a lot of their staffing issues, and they see that as a credible goal, but they also hope that they can exceed that again and maybe push it closer to 50,000, something well above what they saw last year.
So where are we on veteran homelessness? Is the rate going down? Are they increasing their number of their goal year over year? What more specifically do those goals look like?
Well, look, I think this is a bigger look at just how much VA has accomplished and how they've sort of plateaued on the issue of homelessness. They, since 2010, we've seen a steady decline. The number of homeless veterans in America has dropped by more than 50%. But last year, Housing and Urban Development, in their annual point-in-time count, saw an increase in the number of veterans and an increase in the number of Americans who are dealing with homelessness. So there is a concern in the community that, because of some changes in laws, because of some of the rollback of COVID protections that were out there for veterans and for other individuals, that we may be backsliding some, that this pretty positive trend might just stabilize or might not be as aggressive. And we're still talking about somewhere around 35,000 veterans in America who are homeless on any given night. So that's a pretty large number, and a number that everyone wants to bring down as close to zero as they can. So the question for this year is, what new efforts have to be put in place? What new partnerships does VA and other federal agencies have to put in place to make sure that they can get to these folks? And can they continue the trend downward? Or are we at a plateau moment where we need, a large infusion of resources or a large change in what's going on before we can keep solving that problem?
Also on your radar for today, the Department of Veterans Affairs can now begin trials of certain psychedelic therapies. That's after Congress passed the fiscal 2024 budget for the VA that included an amendment on psychedelics research. The bill encourages the VA to use $20 million to conduct nationwide trials of certain breakthrough psychedelic therapies. Such therapies include the use of MDMA, also known as ecstasy or Molly, and psilocybin, also known as magic mushrooms. A breakthrough therapy, for those who don't know, is a designation that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration gives to certain drugs to treat the most serious conditions when the initial studies of those drugs show substantial improvement over medicines that are currently available. Here's why it matters. Various agencies within the federal government are expanding research into the medicinal properties of psychedelics. Lawmakers in December passed the first ever provision allowing the Defense Department to fund federal or state studies of the effects of psychedelic therapies. Select service members who have been diagnosed with PTSD or TBI may be eligible to receive a waiver from Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin that allows them to partake in the studies. The FDA last month also announced a joint approach of talk therapy and MDMA would receive a fast-track review. That's a timeline of 6 months rather than 10 months. The FDA provided a target date of August 11th to wrap up its decision-making process. The initial results of these breakthrough therapies have proven promising. One study from the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies found that 86% of participants receiving MDMA-assisted therapy saw clinically meaningful improvement in their symptoms. And now here's some other stories we're hearing chirps about. Russia's state media reported yesterday that Yemen's Houthi rebels claim to have a new hypersonic missile in their arsenal. David E. Harris, who flew bombers for the U.S. military and broke barriers in 1964 when he became the first black pilot hired at a major U.S. airline, died. He was 89. Sailors will soon be able to work out at on-base fitness centers anytime they want. And the Department of Defense's artificial intelligence czar will leave the high-profile post next month. And you better watch your back, because on this day in history, in 44 BC, Julius Caesar was stabbed to death on the Ides of March. So, yeah, happy Ides of March, I guess. Anyway. That's it for us this morning. To get more top stories and breaking news, go to defensenews.com/EBB to subscribe to the Early Bird Brief newsletter. Please give us a like, rating, and a comment wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at @defense_news and @military times. The Early Bird Brief is hosted and produced by me, Simone Z. Perez. Today's episode featured stories by Leo Shane III, Megan Myers, and myself. Our editor-in-chief is Mike Cruz. Have a great day.